When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite, looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Within the gaming world, there are your general gamers, but then there are those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming. If you're one of those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming, we certainly got the place to send you. Scorpion Lair Games. That's right, Scorpion Lair Games is the creators of the true crime hit Killers, the card game. Let's not forget they also have Killers Clothing Company, their profiler game, and things like the 5-Minute Murder channel on YouTube. And we certainly can't forget the new book that is certainly a hit, Beyond the Headliners, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Make sure you visit Jeff and the Scorpion Lair Games on Facebook and everywhere today.
This is Jonathan L Bowen, writer-director of The Comic Shop, and you're listening to Crazy Train Radio.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today.
This next guest was born and raised in Flint, Oregon, and is a graduate of Oregon State University with a degree in philosophy. Even though he didn't finish film school, he certainly is trying to make an impact in the industry with his production company, JLB Media Productions. And he's got a new upcoming project called The Comic Shop. So let's go ahead and welcome Mr. Jonathan L Bowen.
As I mentioned in the introduction, Mr. Jonathan L Bowen from The Comic Shop which is his new project. Jonathan, how the hell are you, sir?
Oh, pretty good. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Right on. And I actually did some reading because for some odd reason, my parents wanted me to know how to read and write and all that shit. But, yeah, those bastards, I know. Thank God they don't listen to this and disagree with the show, but that's a whole nother matter. So they won't hear that. But, so first and foremost, where did your interest in film begin?
Yeah, so So basically, I became interested in being a filmmaker. Kind of funny enough, when the Star Wars special editions hit theaters, um, I didn't really care about seeing them. Everyone in my class was talking about it, and so I decided, just to go opening weekend. Um, it was that first Saturday. So the story is kind of like my mom and I went to the theater downtown to get tickets, and we were hoping for like afternoon, whatever. So around 2:30. And they told us, oh, well, we're completely sold out until 10:30 tonight. And I just remember thinking, like, doesn't everyone have this movie on VHS? How is it sold out till 10:30? It doesn't even make sense to me. And so I asked her, I was like, well, it's a Saturday, and I guess I was 13 then. So I was like, come on, can we please just go? I mean, it's not a big deal. We'll stay up late one night. And so she's like, okay, we'll ask your dad. And so we end up going, and more than half the theater is full of people with like costumes and lightsabers and I don't know, all kinds of craziness going on. Which to me at the time was really weird. Like I just remember thinking, what is going on here?
Those cosplayers, damn it.
Yeah, like I thought, like I've never seen anything like this before. And so yeah, it went from starting, with like, gosh, this is so strange. Like what's with these people, to all the applause throughout the movie. Like every first appearance got applause. Like there's Chewbacca, there's R2, whatever it was. There's the Lucasfilm logo. I mean, and so I remember like kind of somewhere in there like getting these goosebumps and just thinking like, wow, like this movie's 20 years old and it means this much to all these people, like all this time later. And I just thought that was so inspiring. And so it wasn't as much just about Star Wars. It was really like that this is the power of cinema, that something can leave this big of an impact with people. And it was that day I marked where I was like, I want to do this one day. I want to be a filmmaker. But it did start out like I thought I wanted to do visual effects. And then I took the C++ class in high school and kind of messed around with some programming. And I thought, I'm not good at this. This is not for me. And then I thought about it too, and I was like, the effects aren't what I ever liked about Star Wars. It was the storytelling and the mythology. So I'm going to be a director. That's what I remember thinking after that.
So, it's funny. Like I said, I was doing a little homework here, which is scary. It almost makes me look professional after almost 13 years. But so in that reading, I saw you went to Oregon State University and got the Chevy Chase degree in philosophy.
The Zen philosopher Basho once wrote, "A flute with no holes is not a flute. And a donut with no hole is Danish." He's a funny guy. I'm going to give you a little advice. There's a force in the universe that makes things happen. And all you have to do is get in touch with it. Stop thinking, let things happen, and be the ball.
You dropped out of film school twice. And yes, I went with Caddyshack, folks.
Yeah,
Sue me
that's right.
with that reference. So what made you say after dropping out of film school, because that's the traditional route, let me go get an education on that.
Sure.
And say, screw it, I'm going to go to Hollywood and LA anyway and learn on the go to know what I need to know as far as making films.
Yeah. So the first time, basically, at 18, I really didn't feel mature enough to be that far from home without really knowing anybody. It wasn't an experience that was going well for me. And this isn't to blame it on one thing, but I lived about 5 minutes from LAX, and 9/11 happened within like 10 days or something of me moving down to LA. And so it was these 5 eerie days of like all air traffic being grounded. If you did hear something in the sky, you knew it was military. I mean, it had to be some sort of official thing. And it was it was just a scary time. And, of course, my mom didn't make it better. So I'm worried about you down there in LA, that's a terrorist target and all this stuff. So that didn't really help the situation.
I got to ask the way you said that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way because I have a similar background. Is mom Jewish? She hit you with the Jewish guilt?
No, she grew up in a pretty like, oh, I don't know, like Southern Baptist or something. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not sure what it was, but she grew up in a kind of fire and brimstone Christian background.
That's the things I get. Oi.
Yeah, yeah, and my parents both actually like grew up in really religious households, and then both became atheists. So
all right, so back to our previously scheduled story. 5 days out, and mom's worried.
So then I decided I did take a class down there in my first semester that was called "What is the Best Life?" And it was a philosophy class. It was like it met a core requirement. So I had this great teacher, and he really got me interested in philosophy. And I really thought that, well, I'm still interested in film, but maybe I get a philosophy degree undergrad, and I can use this sort of all this knowledge towards the storytelling that I want, because I kind of always knew I wanted to tell stories that I thought had some sort of like depth to them, some sort of something there to say. Like there needed to be some sort of message if possible. Now, that doesn't mean that it's something on top or overt. Like I love the old quote where it's like, if you want to send a message, call Western Union. But that was the old studio head. So then when I came back down to LA, I fully intended before that to get, to actually go to a grad school. So when I graduated Oregon State, I had straight A's. I won 1B the final semester. My guy in screenwriting kind of screwed me with that one. But I ended up just deciding on my own. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm done with school. I've had enough of it. I don't have it in me to do 3 years of school. And I also thought to myself, like, film school actually does not have enough to teach me. Like, the first year, it's like, oh, here we're going to learn about film theory. I'm like, I already knew about film theory. I already took every class I put on it. I had run a movie review site for 4 years at that point, 5 years, I think. And I wasn't interested in sitting in a classroom. I wanted to be like hands-on. So I found LA Film School, which was very hands-on, a 1-year program, but like a for-profit school, you got to be careful with those things because the priority is making money. It isn't like
surprise how that happens.
Academic accolades. So I say we, my business partner and I met in film school. We went there for about 8 weeks, and the first 8 weeks was its own block. They had like 4 little blocks, and it was intense. It would be at least 8 hours a day, and they would have you in on Saturdays, which wouldn't usually be the full day. It'd usually be about 6 hours. And then they try to give us homework as if somehow we had time to do that, like living on our own and actually at school from as early as 6 a.m. to as late as like 7 p.m., So we learned a ton. It was extremely valuable, like that block. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think back then they actually had some sort of 8-week course that was intensive. They called it like boot camp. So I basically did the boot camp portion. And I heard way too many times from the teachers that, oh, you kids will learn the best doing it out on your own. Like once you kids get out into the world and blah, blah. And I just remember thinking like, okay, I'll take your advice. I don't need this anymore then. And it became way too much like the school didn't have the correct resources. So I had to buy my own equipment. I bought my own camera, and my business partner was another. We were both older. We both had some money going into film school. And he was like, I think 31. He ran a business up in San Jose. So him and I like had trouble dealing with the 18-year-olds in class, whereas like the level of maturity just wasn't really there. But I will say I learned a lot. And then when we went out on our own, I just started like learning how to do all this stuff. And I think that there's good and bad. I had a best friend from high school. He went to film school at Chapman, and Chapman has amazing resources. Like the whole sound stage they built, the equipment that they've got, it's really, really impressive. But the one thing he didn't know, and he kind of would give me a tough time, like, well, you didn't go to films, you didn't get your proper education. And I would ask him, I would say things like, yeah, okay, Brian, do you know how to get insurance for a shoot? Well, no, the school takes care of. Yeah, that's right, they do. Well, I know how to get my own insurance. Do you know the best place in Hollywood to rent a C-stand? Well, I mean, the school has, yeah, that's right. The school has everything, so you don't have to do the actual practical work. But I know how to do all those things because I have to do it out in the real world. So there was some of that where it was like, it is being thrown into the deep end, but like, yeah, at least you have to learn how to swim. And if you don't, then you're not going to last long. So.
And this is the smart ass of me. I started when you explained it to me. Not that you haven't noticed that I can have a little bit of a smart ass to me, but
That's all
I
good.
was thinking of Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield when he's going in the class and he's telling the teacher, "Well, what about this? Hey, yo, well, what about the, you know the scene I'm talking about, that first day in economics class, and his kids going, Dad, shut up." Yeah.
You will see the final bottom line requires the factoring in of not just the material and construction costs, but also the architect's fees and the costs of land servicing.
Oh, you left out a bunch of stuff.
Oh, really? Like what, for instance?
Well, first of all, you're going to have to grease the local politicians for the sudden zoning problems that always come up. Then there's the kickbacks to the carpenters. And if you plan on using any cement in this building, I'm sure the teams would like to have a little chat with you, and that'll cost you. Oh, and don't forget a little something for the building inspectors. Then there's a long-term cost, such as waste disposal. I don't know if you're familiar with who runs that business, but I assure you it's not the Boy Scouts.
That'll be quite enough, Mr. Mellon. Maybe bribes and kickbacks and mafia payoffs are how you do business. But they are not part of the legitimate business world. And they're certainly not part of anything I'm teaching in this class. Do I make myself clear?
Sorry, just trying to help, that's all.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so the other thing that I will say, and I really credit this as being a big point, is so in those 8 weeks in film school, we learned also what we didn't know, if this makes any sense. So like if you plopped somebody like an alien in front of a human computer and then said just do stuff with it, like the problem isn't that they wouldn't just not know how to do stuff. The problem is they don't even know what stuff exists that they need to learn how to do. So at least in film school, we could know things like, oh, okay, this is how the set works. Now, maybe we don't know enough about like exactly how this part of it works, but we at least know that we don't know. So now we can set about to learn. But before that film school experience, I didn't really know what a script supervisor did. I wasn't as clear on like how valuable a first AD is, or why is there a second AD, or things like this. So at least I came out understanding like, okay, these are all these positions, and this is like why they're necessary and do what they do. I think you sometimes do come into things, I bet a lot of people do, where they think like, oh, well, why is all this crew necessary? They're all standing around, they're not doing anything. And then when you actually make projects, you're like, oh no, these people are all useful, but film works in phases, right? Where it's like this group comes in and they're working really hard and now their job's done, but then the next group has to do their thing. And sure, the grips stand around while the acting's happening, but they were working their butt off for, an hour and a half before the scene. So,
It's funny. In my experience, similar with the education, but I have a history background and a communications degree, right? But I was going to go to not full set, different types for radio. And so the executive director of the school, like you said, at these type of programs, it's all about making the money. And he looked at some of my references who were legendary in the Philadelphia radio market, right? Because you know how you fill out, you give references and stuff.
Right.
He looks at it, he goes, can you give me 10 minutes? Steps out of the room, comes back, he goes, so listen, I just called your references because they come in and speak at the school before, right?
Right.
Okay. And they told you I'm an asshole, right? Yes. But in all kidding aside, he goes, this is a waste of time for you to come to school. You obviously know what you're doing. You're better off putting the money into the program, kind of like what you were saying.
Right. Yeah. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, when I went there, it was $38,000 for the year. That was if you didn't take any money out for like cost of living, all that stuff, and which I didn't. So when I quit, I think I got 29,000 back, and I was able to use that for equipment, making shorts. The only thing that was super awkward is, my dad was paying for this. And so when he came down to visit, it was basically right as I was deciding to quit. It just, the timing was just funny on that. And so I kind of I told him all the things that sucked about the school. No offense to them, but and I wrote them a letter so they knew exactly, the reasons why 29,000 walked out the door. And my dad kind of said after I complained about all this stuff, wow, that's too bad, but what can you do? And I was like, well, I'm gonna quit on Monday. And then he's like, really? And I told him the whole plan that my business partner and I were gonna quit and we're gonna go, try to actually make money doing video, corporate videos and that kind of stuff. And then he changes his whole thing. He's like, oh yeah, screw them. You know what? If they're gonna act that way, you're better off without them. But I think the problem was I gave them so many opportunities and I did want to stick it out. I'm not a person who quits, but we had issues like the air conditioning got broken somehow in the theater. It broken to the point where it hit 50 degrees. And when it's 80 outside in LA, we're all bundled up and, down jackets. And we would say, please, somebody get this fixed. It's not a good classroom atmosphere to be in there for 3 hours and it's just Arctic. And then there would be things like, well, we don't have enough equipment for everyone to have the camera. It's like, well, how are we supposed to do the assignment if you don't even have the equipment? And I was personally bothered that they were teaching Avid. I still don't care about Avid. I understand that a lot of the industry is very focused on their precious software. But I'm like, no one uses Avid except for people editing $200 million movies. And you know how you get to edit a $200 million movie? You edit little stuff and then you work your way up. You don't just start editing Avatar. So they're sitting there teaching the kids, well, we're going to use Avid. And our teacher, I asked him, I raised my hand. I'm like, so do you use Avid then for your professional freelance work? And he said, no, I never use Avid. He's like, I always use Final Cut. And I'm like, well, then why are we learning how to only use Avid? That doesn't make any level of sense to me. And he's like, well, it's just the way the school is. And I'll never forget thinking that obviously the software is not that great because they would tell us absolutely under no circumstances are these computers to be connected to the internet because they are so sensitive that if a virus could come in. And I'm just thinking you have to be kidding me. Use a Mac. You don't need to worry about viruses on Mac. They do exist, but keep the software up to date within a reason. You won't be worried about it. And the other thing I thought was funny is this kind of thing. So I get there, and this is 2007, so it is a while ago, but they've actually got the old mouse with the cord and the ball on the bottom of it. And my mind was blown. I was like, I haven't seen one of these things since the early 90s. I mean, I had had a laser mouse since at least 94, 95. And I just thought to myself, we pay a lot of money to go to the school, and they can't seem to be bothered to keep any of the equipment up to date, which is just really weird.
All right. So obviously the main thing here is the comic shop. And from what I understand, you actually knew this guy, Mike, or a guy similar to Mike, who is the owner of a small shop in a strip in Vegas. And you wanted to give Mike, say, a happy ending. So what do you want to say about this whole movie? Because obviously, from what I understand, the idea and the concept started, give or take, 2018.
Yes, that's right. So there was a real life Mike who was just kind of the jumping off point. I was Brandon in the real life version because I was kind of I was younger, but I got to know Mike because he ran one of the local comic shops that I got my mom to drag me to probably at least once a week or so. And kids, they go through phases. So it started as Marvel comic stuff, and eventually it was Magic the Gathering, Spawn comics, a little of this, a little of that. And he was my dealer. So he was always good at getting whatever, was popular, was cool. And kind of as the years went on, I noticed that Mike wasn't at the shop as much. He left other employees to run it. And they eventually one of them kind of threw him under the bus and said that he was across the street drinking. And so, I mean, I think it was 12 or so years old. I didn't really know exactly like what that means, as far as like why he would be doing that at 2 in the afternoon or 3. So, one day the shop closed permanently, and I heard from one of the other owners that he went to drive for UPS. So basically, what I did is I kind of imagined, like, what if I made this fictional story where there's a reason that Mike isn't happy with what he's doing, and maybe that's why he's across the street drinking, and maybe there was some real dream that he wanted to pursue. And I'm gonna write Mike this happy ending that like he didn't get, in real life. So I think in some ways it was like my adult way of like rethinking this moment of life. And then there was a bunch of other things combined into that I thought maybe I can understand Mike, because now I'm approaching the age that he was, and I find myself doing this corporate work that I'm not super passionate about. It pays the bills, but I don't really love it. And I want to be doing something that I was passionate about, which was making movies, and I hadn't been able to do that in more than a decade. So that was kind of where it was. It was like, let me fuse me with the jumping off point of real life Mike, and then the other character Brandon is kind of like a young Jonathan in some ways. Like, I never wanted to be an illustrator, but like he's very full of hope and optimistic, a little shy sometimes, a little awkward maybe. And that was kind of the birth of the basic bones of the idea.
So, obviously, my final question for you, sir, and obviously we want you to, I'm going to have links to everything, but where can people see the comic shop? Well, also, because you were talking about it earlier, where can people follow what you're doing with JLB Media Production? Which, by the way, I should say, specializes in business-to-business marketing, web videos, and things, all that kind of, the way the world we are today. So where can people follow that, as well as view comic strip or comic shop, excuse me?
Yeah, so our website for JLB Media Productions is just jlbmedia.com. But as far as like updates on the movie and other projects I've done, like whether it's music videos or shorts or things like that, I have directorbowen.com, and I'm also on Instagram at directorbowen. So those are pretty easy ways, and I try to keep the blog really updated on my website. So any sort of news about the movie or where to be able to see it, I'll definitely get it there as soon as possible. All I can say is we're in the final stage of delivery. So it's been a matter of like all these legal documents, all these, rights clearances for music and all this boring stuff. Just getting that whole package to the distributor so that they can then go out and sell it to, one of these streamers. And that's what I'm looking forward to, because I want to be able to have a date for people in a place that they can finally see it.
Obviously, like, it's key for these small companies, and make sure you do everything there. You like, share, subscribe, all the main things that we encourage here if you like what you heard here on these episodes. But Jonathan, thank you so much for taking the time and doing this finally.
Well, yeah, thank you for taking the time, and I really love to have the opportunity to chat with you, so it's great.
Hey there, Friday fans. We know how much you enjoy the movies. Enjoy grabbing your Friday merchandise and interacting with the Friday family, whether it be at conventions or during our particular watch-alongs. Well, when you're looking to get yourself masks, why not check out our friends over at Camp Blood Customs out of New York State and order your specific custom mask from any of the films. All orders are made specifically. Your needs and wants are. Make sure you find Camp Blood Customs on Facebook, Instagram, and all over social media and order yours today.
Hey y'all, this is Adam Marcus, writer and director of Jason Goes to Hell and Secret Santa, and you are taking a ride on Crazy Train Radio. Badass.